Namaskar, all of you. Let us proceed for prayers. Together, all of you. Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarotam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranaratosti abahu purushakaram shankhachakrasidharinam सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः हरिः ओम्. It is noteworthy that the first chapter of Yoga Sutras precisely should be called as first quarter. Samadhi Pada, first quarter of Yoga Sutras. Just describe the yoga. And there is no instruction as such. You will not find, you did not get any piece of instruction in the first Samadhi Pada. It only described, defined, explained yoga. Then what was its purpose for you and me, for us? It merely described what yoga is, and there was not even a one sutra which could be called as instructional. So no instruction whatsoever in the first chapter. It is because the yoga was for supremely qualified yogi who doesn't require instruction. Suppose you are going to conduct a class and Guruji enrolls as a student in your class. What are you going to teach him? So, there is a class of yogi called Uttamadhikari, supremely qualified yogis. They don't need instructions. But then why it has been mentioned? Because they are the ones who will be practicing authentic, genuine yoga. And for we commoners to know what is authentic, genuine yoga, it is important for you and me to look into the first chapter right at the beginning. Because it will give us some information about what genuine yoga is, what authentic yoga is, what is quintessence of yoga, what is essential yoga. So it is for us information bank. Enormous information of genuine, authentic, classical yoga was mentioned for us. So there was no piece of instruction. Now this is so important for a neophyte. Suppose you are going to visit a tourist place. Is it not better that you have some information beforehand rather than landing there as a total foreigner, having no clue, no idea about that place, what is where, what has to be seen? If you have no idea, then what is your plight? Therefore, that's how we today download certain informations if you are going to go to a place for the very first time. So we are comfortable, we are clear about how to go about, what to ask for. But if you just land up as a novice, you have difficulties, you have problems, and you will be missing most of the important things, and unimportant things will be cited and will come back. So, for you and me, it is important to know what is essential yoga. Otherwise, what happens? See, today, since we don't have this classical and very formal kind of process in yoga, because it has been professionalized, how do we project yoga for you people and how it was projected for us? It is good for health. It is good for health, fitness, well-being. Therefore, take up to yoga. And that's how we all took up to yoga. So at some point in time, there will be disillusionment. So for us, the first chapter has an important place because it will tell us what is really authentic, genuine, classical yoga. Otherwise, there will be so many, it's the best kind of exercise and you will start your pursuit. Or it has remedies for your problems which crop up now and then in our life, headaches, stomach aches, sprain, catches, whatever. Then certain diseases come up. Then the old age. So if we are told yoga is good for that, then we will carry out our pursuit, thinking that it is for our well-being, and therefore it is useful for us, and we'll be starting to take up yoga. But in classical times, the approach was to present the subject as it is, classically, essentially, for one to know. Then perhaps if you feel that it is not useful for us, you may not do it. But then because the consumerism came, because the professionalism came, because it had to be popularized, we wanted the whole world to embrace. So we had different process, say about 150, 200 years back. Since then, we started making it more appealing to people. And then at later point in time, tell them, no, this is not actually the yoga, that is yoga. So that was nothing wrong there. That's an approach. That is a practical approach. This is a pedantic text on yoga. They can't be going by the practical approach. So we will all tell you it is wonderful. We will say send your children, it's good for children. Send your teenagers, it's good for teenagers. So we will tell you how it is good for children, then teenagers and adolescent and teenagers, etc., young ones. And then somehow we will cast a net on larger part of society to be getting to yoga. But sooner or later we will have to tell them, no, this is not really the yoga, something else is yoga. So I want you to note that nothing is wrong and right. Not that straight away going classical approach, classical process itself is right. Then hardly 0.0001% people will be coming up. But if we have this step, giving a consumer package, appealing package, then we will have greater people into the net. And that's how yoga can be popularized, and later we can be doing sorting out, etc. So the point is here, in the first chapter there is no mention of any instruction. There is no instruction. Only means of yoga are mentioned. Abhyasa vairagya abhyam nirodha. The means of yoga are mentioned. However, it doesn't get opened out. Because for a proficient yogi, he doesn't need to be knowing what is abhyasa. He is clear about it. He has collected all the basic components. He has evolved the potentials. So also vairagya, he knows what is vairagya. He has collected all the components of vairagya. It only has to be set for a particular session of practice. Just as you get prepared for your practice. These days, right from closing your cell phone, switching off your cell phone, you start practicing, because if the cell phone is on, you'll be disturbed. So that's how we do certain things. Close the calling bell at the door, and then start our practice, get warmed up, etc. So, similarly, yogi just has to have memory of what is abhyasa, vairagya. He is already having disposition, he is already having the gravity. Just as we get going for our job, he gets going for his job of yoga. He has all samskars, he has all components collected, evolved. He has to just put them into a constitution, assembly, then the yoga would blossom. And their yoga is samadhi. Sampragnat, asampragnat is their yoga. And therefore they don't need instructions as to what is vairagya, what is abhyasa, how the vairagya has to come, how the abhyasa has to come, how to develop abhyasa potential, that's all they have attained it. And therefore it doesn't describe how to collect abhyasa potentials. What is abhyasa? I have repeatedly told you, effort to be steady the mind. Any effort to be calm the mind. First of all, the mind should be calm. The mind must be quiet. Then only you can proceed towards restraint. So at the outer door of yoga, there is the mind. And the mind should be quiet, not disquiet. Mind should be unagitated, not agitated. Mind must be steady. That's a psychological mind. That should be steady. That's the outer gate. That's the portal for yoga. And therefore, any effort to be steady the mind for us, for a yogi, any effort to be steady the chitta is abhyasa. For us, be steady the mind, and for yogi, be steady the chitta. The chitta is whole mind stuff. Now look at our process. We don't get to do yoga because our mind is quiet. We get to do our yoga to make the mind quiet. Is that right? We get to doing yoga because we want to get quietude in the mind. We want to make mind quiet. Not that our mind is quiet, therefore we do yoga. Because that's a rarity. If that is the condition, first your mind should be quiet and then you should do yoga, then that is a difficult qualification. Because rarely the mind is quiet. More often the mind is disquiet. So therefore, the yoga in later times, when it had to be presented to people, then we said, by yoga you will be able to get quiet mind. Mind will be quiet and mind will be pacified. So also if the condition is put, first you must have vairagya, then you should take up yoga. It's almost a taboo. It almost amounts to a taboo that you can't be doing yoga because you don't have vairagya. What is vairagya? Thirstlessness for objects of this world and other worlds. Now this is quite a difficult, cumbersome condition. That you must have thirstlessness for all that. It almost means it's a taboo for you. Yoga is a taboo. Now then what we do it, you start doing yoga, you will develop vairagya. So our mode of yoga is that commence your pursuit of yoga, you will get steadiness of the mind. Commence your yoga, you will slowly become moderate, temperate, which is very earlier stage of vairagya. Unless you are not moderate and not temperate, you can't be having thirstlessness. You can't have vairagya. So we will say, commence your yoga, you will become temperate and moderate. So see how our yoga is reversed. Their yoga is for those who have acquired fully blossomed abhyas and vairagya potentials. Whereas for us to collect potentials of abhyasa, potentials of vairagya, we embark upon yoga. That's the beauty of this subject. That is why the subject has been described as Kalpataru. There is a book of collection of articles of Guruji which is called Yoga Kalpataru. It's also available in Marathi. Kalpataru means what? You will sit under the tree, you will get whatever fruit you want. Fruit means not just in the sense of botanical fruit, any fruit. I want happiness, I want glory, I want rich, I want health, you will get it. That is called Kalpa Vruksha, which is only available in heavens. So heavens you don't have to take services. Door delivery of this pleasure, door delivery of that pleasure. In heaven you get everywhere Kalpa Vrukshas. You just sit under the tree, have your desire, you get fulfilled. So yoga comes that way. So see how our yoga and see how we reverse the position. How precepts are reversed. There is nothing wrong about it. And practically that's how it goes. So we have to, in order that we understand what is genuine, authentic yoga, then we have like Google Map. If you are driving in a foreign place, unknown place, if you have a Google Map next to you, you know that you are not misguided. You will reach your destination without hassle, without missing it, without difficulty, because you will be instructed 50 meters turn right, 100 meters turn left, etc. Is that right? So the first chapter is a Google Map for us. We might do yoga for any purpose, but we should know what is the right purpose of yoga. So there will be less chance of we getting misguided. So the first map serves as a Google Map while we are in process of yoga. So the means of yoga are mentioned, but the means are not opened out. Where is the sutra which opens out means of abhyasa, means of vairagya, how to get it? It only mentions means, that's all. Now to open out, the second chapter comes in. That is why it is called a precept on sadhana, not sadhana. It is sadhana pada, not sadhana pada. Sadhana means practices. Sadhana means means. So it is mistaken that the second chapter is said to be a practical yoga. And that's why it is also conceived to be sadhana pada, precept on practices. Many of the translators have given this caption to the chapter, chapter on practices. And then it is more misguiding when you read the first sutra, tapaswadhyayeshwara pradhanani kriya yogaha. Kriya yogaha. Kriya means activity. And that's why it becomes more misleading if you do not have proper background, if you do not have information source, information foundation for you, then it is wrongly construed that second chapter is not sadhana pada, but sadhana pada. First of all, we should know the means. And then we can go after the means. Now in worldly situation, materialistic world situation, we know money is means for everything. Money is means for every need of you. And therefore, we think how to earn money. But if we do not know that money is means to our needs and enjoyments and desires and joys to be satisfied, fulfilled, then we'll be just waiting, how will I get my desire fulfilled? How will I get my joy? But then if you have money, you will be able to get your desire fulfilled, your need fulfilled, your joy, etc., happiness, etc., procured. Money is the means. And therefore you will do something to earn money, accumulate money, get money. Is that right? That is why the means are mentioned. Abhyasa Vairagya are the means of essential yoga. How to get Abhyasa potential and Vairagya potential. How to collect the components of Abhyasa and components of Vairagya. Therefore the second chapter starts opening out. It mentions yoga for two hierarchies again. The first chapter is mentioned for supreme hierarchy, highest hierarchy. The second chapter mentions yoga for two hierarchies. The middle hierarchy and the lower hierarchy. Madhyamadhikari, Adhamadhikari. The first one is Uttamadhikari. Uttama means the best qualified. Madhyama means middle qualified. Adhama means lowly qualified. So second chapter opens out yoga for two. Middle qualified hierarchy and the lowly qualified hierarchy. So for the first one comes Kriya Yoga and for second one comes Ashtanga Yoga. Now again, Kriya Yoga topic is again information which is more closer to what we are going to reach as neophytes. The first chapter is further more distant. So Kriya Yoga is being mentioned. Now what is Vairagya potential? How do you get Vairagya? Vairagya means thirstlessness, desirelessness for all the objects of the world here and objects of the world hereafter about which we must have heard. Like some of the religions promise, if you lead a pious life, you will go to seventh heaven. If you go to seventh heaven, you will have such kind of joys, such kind of pleasures. In the seventh heaven, you have the pleasures which you don't get here, even 1% of it. So you get 10 times, 20 times, 100 times, 1,000 times great pleasures in other worlds. So they tell us about the seven heavens. First heaven, second heaven, third heaven, fourth heaven, seventh heaven. There are progressive pleasures, progressive happiness, progressive delights, progressive accomplishments. So there are celestial pleasures. They are called celestial pleasures. So there are terrestrial pleasures and celestial pleasures. Now the Vairagya implies that we must have thirstlessness for all these objects. Objects of this world, objects of other worlds, about which we must have just heard. Now how will you attain this Vairagya? Will you go on doing standing poses every day? Twice a day, thrice a day? Any logic that by doing regularly standing poses twice a day or thrice a day, any logic to say that you will get Vairagya? Every day doing Shirshasana, Sarvangasana regularly, twice a day, thrice a day, 25 minutes, 35 minutes each time. Is there any logic that you will be getting Vairagya? So what are the means of Vairagya? Has to be pondered over. Because if you recall, Vairagya was related to wisdom in the first chapter. while we were discussing Vairagya, we related it with Jnana, Vairagya, wisdom and thirstlessness. If you are imprudent, unwise, we have lots of desires bubbling. But if you become little wiser, then you will be certainly curtailing those desires. Now you know that you can't be multi-trillionaire this life. So whatever might be the dream of being a multi-trillionaire, you will say, this is nonsense, this is dreamy world, let me not be thinking about it. I will not be a multi-trillionaire in this life. Is that right? So if you are crazy, cranky, then you will go on moving in the dream. Oh, let me become multi-trillionaire. How will I become multi-trillionaire? First I will become multi-millionaire, then billionaire, then trillionaire. So you will go on daydreaming. Once you know this is not possible for me. Now you won't be aspiring the men class. You will never be aspiring to become Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali. Because it will be just an aspiration which will be not fulfilled. So what is there merely aspiring to become the strongest man in the world, richest man in the world, etc. There are so many steps to be climbed up before you become richest in the world and strongest in the world. So many steps are there, you have to climb up the steps. So once you are wise, intelligent, you will start understanding, should I be desiring for this or not? Is this desire going to be mind shattering for me? So if you are intelligent, if you are wise, you will sort out, no, this is not desire for me, it is unsuitable desire. But if you are not wise, then you will be go on hankering over it, trying to have more and more craze about it. So wisdom is required in Vairagya. So if you are wise, most of the desires will vaporize. You will say, this is not actualizable by this life. Why desire? Have desire about it. That's how wisdom is related to Vairagya. Now this Vairagya depends upon some factors. What are those factors? That is why just getting out of the mat and doing yoga is not complete yoga. You will have to do so many other things. So tradition, the long tradition of sages, seers, sagacious people, they have given lots of wisdom resources to tell about this. So therefore there are four kinds of yogas which are mentioned, which will help you develop the various components required for the culminating yoga. There are four kinds of yoga sadhanas. Jnana yoga sadhana, karma yoga sadhana, dhyana yoga sadhana, bhakti yoga sadhana. What we are all doing is only dhyana yoga sadhana. It will only help us develop potentials of dhyana yoga, not other potentials. For other potentials, there is something called as Jnana Yoga Sadhana. Now what is it? Jnana will tell you about, why do we have this thirst or hankering or desire, etc. We have indiscrimination, basically. We don't have discrimination. We need to have discrimination about what is all around us. So that is called Jnana Yoga Sadhana. That's called Nitya Anitya Viveka. What is eternal, what is transitory? What is permanent, what is impermanent? So if the impermanent goes away, you will not be sorrowing a lot. But if you think the impermanent as a permanent thing, and if you lose that, you are shattered. because you thought that this is a permanent thing. But it is gone. If it is gone, you have sorrows. You are devastated. You are shattered. And therefore this Jnana Yoga Sadhana tells you, it gives emphasis on certain discriminations. It is called Nitya Anitya Viveka. Permanent, impermanent discrimination. If you discriminate that this is not going to last long, when you lose it, the sorrow is not there much. But if you think that this is going to remain with me for at least 10 years or 20 years or 50 years, then it goes in 5 months and 10 months and 1 year, you have a lot of sorrows. I thought it will stay longer. It did not stay. So if you clearly know that this is going to not last, or this is going to last this much, that's going to last that much, then when it goes away, you don't have sorrow. If your clothes material which you are wearing every day, if it is torn after 10 years or 15 years, you don't have sorrow. You know, after all, it has become rotten. 10 years I have used it. So, it got torn, there is no problem. But if you get a new cloth, it is torn next day, you have sorrow. So, you should know what is the longevity of a thing. How long this lasts. Whether it is everlasting or not everlasting. How far nitya, how far anitya. How far dependable. How far you can believe, yes, this is going to be here for 1 year. This is going to be with me for 10 years. So that duration, it is for you eternal. It is nitya for you. It is available anytime. But after the period is over, then you don't sorrow. You know, after all, it was supposed to last for 10 years. And not more than 10 years. Not more than 50 years. Not more than 100 years. Suppose we have built a house. And the house collapses after 300 years. Are you going to have sorrow? But if the house is built and it collapses in 3 years, you have sorrows. You expected house should be stay there for at least lifelong, at least 100 years, 200 years. A civil structure should last that much. So it is nitya for a period of time, and then it is anitya. So this we should know clearly about. How far something is dependable, trustworthy in terms of its existence. That's called Nitya Anitya Viveka. Second one is Atma Anatma Viveka. What is Atma? What is Anatma? What is me? What is not me but mine? What is me and what is mine? The mine is not me. So the difference between the soul and non-soul. Atma, Anatma. I am soul and there is something which is not soul. So that discrimination is also important. That is knowledge process. The Jnana will tell you about what is Atma, what is Anatma. Suppose it is your fountain pen, you have lost it. You have a sorrow. You don't have sorrow because fountain pen is lost. Because if my fountain pen is lost, you don't have sorrow. If my fountain pen is lost, you don't have sorrow. The sorrow is not because of loss of fountain pen, it is loss of your fountain pen. So wherever you place yourness, it is going to increase the sorrow potential and desire potential. This is mine, must be protected. This is mine, must be preserved. This is mine, must be saved. This is mine, should be nurtured, nourished, maintained. So if you start yourness on many superfluous things, then your business of life becomes cumbersome. Passion will go on bubbling more and more and more. Because this house is mine, this car is mine, this property is mine, everything mine. Then I will have to protect all that. So I will have to have desires. Desire to earn wealth, money, to be protecting all those. So the mindness goes out of proportion to me. The me is V bit. And the mine is Z bit. Z. There is no expression in English like that. V bit is there. So me is a tiny thing, but then a mine, I'm imposing mineness on so many things. My people, my family, my house, my property, my things, my business. So therefore, the desire and passion should be bubbling, because of the mind has expanded so much. Radius of the mind is so great. I will have to have desires for wealth, money, etc. So it essentially knowing what is really Atma, Anatma is so important. What is me and what is mine? There must be discrimination. Sukha Dukkha Viveka. What is pain and pleasure for us? What we feel is pleasure for us. What is painful for us? What we feel painful is painful for us. It depends upon your feelings. You feel that this is pleasure, therefore it is a pleasure. It doesn't mean that that is a pleasure and therefore it is a pleasure. Do you understand? It is not that it is pleasure and therefore it is pleasure for me. No. It is pleasure for me, therefore it is pleasurable. It is sorrowful for me, therefore it is sorrowful. Object itself doesn't have sorrow. Object itself doesn't have the class of pleasure. It is all within you, the pain and pleasure. So we should know what is essential pain and pleasure and what is experiential pain and pleasure. If we don't discriminate, all that is experientially pain and pleasure, we are go on holding it as pain and pleasure, and then carry out our dynamics of life. So we should know what is experiential pleasure and essential pleasure, what is experiential sorrow and what is essential sorrow. So that again needs a wisdom process. To be getting experiences, wisdom is not so important. That's why when you have wisdom, you identify this seems to be a pleasure, not a pleasure. This seems to be a pain, not a pain. Is that right? If you have wisdom, you are able to identify it seems to be a pleasurable, not really a pleasurable thing. Or this seems to be a painful thing, not really a painful thing. If you have wisdom, then it overscores your sensitivities and sensations, and it tells you are sensing it to be pleasure, it is not pleasure. You are sensing it to be pain, it is not pain. It needs wisdom. See, suppose we are not well, we go to a physician, he says you will have to take an injection. We say no problem. We ask a child, you have to be injected. The child will say, no, I don't want injection. Is that right? Because we know injection will be experience of pain at the time of prick. That's all. But then we know that we are going to overcome the symptom and will be free from that disease. Therefore, we don't hesitate to get a prick from a physician. The child doesn't have wisdom, intelligence, it is innocent, and therefore it rebels, it cries, it resists. If it comes to know that, it will be injected. Why is it? It is because of the innocence of the child, and it is because of your not innocence, or kind of knowledge and wisdom, therefore you opt for it. It's not that it is a pleasurable prick. You are going to get some prick. It won't be a pleasure. Yet you know that it is experientially a painful thing, but later it is going to be of some bounty. So when you are little matured, you start accepting the things with a little bit discrimination. Okay? That is why Sukha Dukkha Viveka. What is seemingly painful and pleasurable, what is actually painful, pleasurable. If you have this discrimination, you will opt for seemingly painful thing, knowing that it is not pain, it is pleasure giving later. It is later for my good. Therefore, you don't hesitate. That's why this discrimination is again process of jnana sadhana. If you don't have jnana sadhana, a knowledge pursuit, if you are, then you will remain in ignorance, innocence. So, Sukha Dukkha Viveka. So this discrimination between permanent, impermanent, the self and non-self, and pain and pleasure, Sukha Dukkha, this discrimination is important. That's the Jnana process. That is Jnana Sadhana. Now where do you get this? How will you get to know what is permanent, what is impermanent? What is pleasurable, what is painful? What is soul and non-soul? How will you discriminate? Where will you get the discrimination? Is there any academy which teaches about it? What is the process? The process for that, therefore, is opened out in the purport of yoga philosophy. Sat Sangha. If you recall, the other day I told you, Sat Sangha, Sadhana Sangha, Shastra Sangha, Ahar, Vihar, Achar, Vichar. These are fundamental, foundational components of yoga. Therefore, Sat Sangha, Sat means truth. Association with the truth. Affiliation with the truth. If you are truth seeker, if you come to know the truth, it implies that you get discrimination between right and wrong, permanent, impermanent, pleasure and pain. Discrimination will come. The moment you get some knowledge about truth, some knowledge about reality. Sat literally means truth. Sat, therefore Satya. The word Satya comes from Sat. So you must be truth seekers. You must be truth seekers, not fact seekers. In our business of life, we are all fact seekers. Because the fact works in our life. For our business of life, mundane life, practicality of life, we must know the facts. That's why we are all fact seekers. So somewhere we should know the difference between fact, true, real. So we need a thought process. In our worldly dynamics of life, there will be hardly any encouragement to carry out any investigation, inquiry into it. Because the dynamics of practical life are such that we will only go after facts. What is actual? Tell me actuality. Tell me factuality. We rarely go for reality. Unless you are seekers of knowledge and wisdom, we will not go for reality. For practical purpose of life, we will go after actuality. Tell me what is actual. What is it actually? And what is it factually? So we are only concerned about facts and actuals. not the reals. But human psyche is so made up of that we are, in a deep core of consciousness, we are truth seekers. That's why we don't have such a condition. Let me know what is not true. We don't go seeking what is not true. We always go seeking the truth. We don't want someone to divulge what is untrue. We want someone to divulge what is true. So in our fabric of consciousness, main fabric of consciousness, we are truth seekers. But because of this turmoil of mundane life, other things are scoring over it. Like you said, I have a deep desire. But then if the other desires are having lots of shouts and cries, then that main desire goes to background. If there is clamor, of all these superfluous desires, that is not heard. The true voice in the heart is not heard because of so much of clamor created by mundane life, worldly life. But actually we are at the core, the fabric of it, of consciousness, we are truth seekers. We want to know the truth, but we don't seek the truth. It is because of clamor of other needs and desires. There is such a strong clamor that they will not make you hear that. However, that's a call from inside. So therefore, we don't seek the truth. We want to know the truth. So know the difference between what you want to know and what you seek. The seeking is because of the clamor. So that's why satsanga. What is satsanga? It is called pravachana. What is pravachana? Pravachana. Prakarshita, prakarshena, exalted. So, in English you don't have this word. Speech can be a politician giving you a speech and a wise man giving you a speech. Any sociologist, psychologist, any scholar in any economics, they can give speech. Economists giving a speech. But we don't say it is pravachana. Pravachana is a word which comes in the realm of truth and real. Whereas economists will speak of facts. But this is in the realm of jnana, adhyatma jnana, that there is pravachana. It will only speak of truth. The speaker will only speak about the truth, the real. That is why it is called satsanga. In satsanga, you will hear about. Therefore, Upanishad says, Atma vare, wonderful quotation, Atma vare, drashtavya, shrotavya, mantavya, nididhyasitavya. About Atma, you must see something, then hear something. And then contemplate over something, and then meditate. So, realities cannot be seen. Is that right? Can you see all realities? We can hardly see any reality. If it comes to seeing, we will not see real. However, our seeing can be basis to explore real. Unless you don't see at all, you will not be seeking the real at all. So this is the first gate which will not give you real. Which will not divulge you real. But it will motivate you towards going for real. Therefore, first see. The things are to be seen. But suppose the seen category is very subtle, ungraspable, very subtle. Then what? You go for microscopes, go for electron microscopes, you go for telescopes, you go for Hubble telescopes. And sometimes it is just deduction. You can't be seeing. Proton, electron cannot be seen. The very subtle things cannot be seen. They should be deducted. They should be deduced. They have to be inferred. All subtle things cannot be seen because they are subtle. Up to a level you can see a subtle thing. If you can't see with naked eyes, you have gadgets, telescope to microscope, electron microscopes to Hubble telescopes. You have devices which are attached to your eyes, and therefore you will be able to see. But something much more subtler than that, then you will not be able to see. You will have to deduce. So mathematics comes in those sciences. The mathematics proves certain things. Those things are not proved in a laboratory by sighting. So higher truths are realized by hearing. It must be heard. You have to hear about quantum theory. You have to hear about particle physics. You can't have dogma, I must see it. You can't be dogmatic about, let me be citing all that. You can't cite. These are all mathematical derivations. The mathematics will give you derivations about what is real. It has to be just understood. It has to be heard. So all subtle knowledge is depending on hearing. Now this reality, truth, etc., they are very subtle, so a lot needs to be heard. See, again that expression comes in English. Something should be sound between the ears. Something should be sound between the ears. If the sound, the ear themselves are having a sound, you have this uncomfortable, it's a discomfiture. Between the ears you must be sound. Now what is being sound? Being wise. Is that right? What is being sound is being wise. So between the ears there is wisdom locus. And if you take the objects about which you have knowledge, Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, all our sensory knowledge pertains to 5 objects, which are Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. How do we get their knowledge? Shabda, audition. Sparsha, tactile touch. Rupa, vision, form. Rasa, the taste, gustatory organ. Gandha, olfactory, nose. These are all 5 objects. Now amongst the 5, which is the subtlest? Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. So this is progression towards gross. Shabda, grosser to that Sparsha, grosser to that Rupa, grosser to that Rasa, grosser to that Gandha. Then subtler, reverse process. So from Gandha you proceed towards Shabda, you go towards subtler. Then subtlest is what? Shabda. What does catch subtlest? Ears. That's why wisdom comes by ears. Wisdom doesn't come by eyes. Wisdom doesn't come by nose. Wisdom doesn't come by tongue. Wisdom doesn't come by touch. Because these are all grosser objects. Subtlest is Shabda. Therefore ears are for superior knowledge, higher knowledge. It's not just one kind of knowledge. It is the finest, superfine kind of knowledge which will come by ears, not by eyes. Eyes objects are very gross. Nose objects are very gross, tongue objects are very gross, touch objects are very gross. But this is very subtle. Therefore, all those higher realm of knowledge, it all depends upon your hearing. You would like to hear what Einstein says. You can't be dogmatic about, show me your theory of relativity. It is to be conceived, it is to be understood, it should be heard. So he'll have to convince you about the the theories of relativities. So someone like Einstein should convince us. Then we are convinced about it, and then we get wisdom about it. You can't say, show me the two relativities. There is nothing to see, nothing to touch and get to know, nothing to taste and get to know, nothing to smell and get to know, but hear and get to know. That's why these are gates of superior knowledge. That's why there is Shravana Sadhana. You will have to do a lot of hearing about yoga. There is much to hear about yoga, rather than our notion that there is a lot to do of yoga, about yoga. If you look at it, take a panoramic view, you will come to know there is a lot to be doing about in yoga. I have got to do a lot. Is that right? There is a lot to hear about yoga. So in Jnana Yoga Sadhana, lot of Shravana Sadhana is required. That's why you have to have Satsanga, hear the noble thoughts, hear the timeless thoughts, values. Those which have values have to be heard about. Those who have eternal values have to be heard about. And that's why we have this aspect in our spiritual process, is to have a lot of satsanga. A lot of hearing has to take place. About Atma, Anatma, it is to be heard. You can't say, take me to a laboratory and show me why something is Atma and why something is Anatma. I cannot show you in a lab under a microscope that this is why this is Anatma and this is why this is Atma. I cannot have any endoscopy, any kind of scan to show you that this scan tells you that this is therefore Anatma, and this scan shows that this is therefore Atma. There is nothing sighting, no sighting there. It's all to be heard and then understood. So Atma and Atma Vivek, Satsanga. Nitya Nitya Vivek, Satsanga. Sukha Dukha Vivek, Satsanga. You cannot send an object to your laboratory and get it tested for pain and pleasure. Why? Because pain and pleasure is inside you. The pain and pleasure is in a way relative. Suppose there is roadside garbage. Will you poke into it? No. Why? You will say, because that object itself is dirty. Is that right? It is relative. You just take a pig there. The pig will immediately smell it and will say, oh, here is a restaurant for me. Aroma. It will poke its mouth into it. Is that right? It is pleasure for it. So it is all within the psyche, the software within pig gives it a class of good and bad. You keep a garbage material on one side, and on the another side, another plate, you keep your 5 delicacies, pancha pakwan. It will put its mouth there, not here. It is a software in psyche. It's not object as such. The fire will burn you and you will perish. Now why does a moth jumps into fire? Although it is burnt, yet it has pleasure into it, and it goes into it and takes the pleasure, and it's perished. For us, fire is something fiery, and we don't want to have fire in close proximity. But a moth, which is another living creature, jumps into it and dies. So these are relative things, pain and pleasures. So it's a software that human beings have, one kind of software. And there are so many softwares for one human being. Less evolved human beings, more evolved human beings, less intelligent, more intelligent, less wise, more wise, stupid, very wise. So little modification there will be in the software. Otherwise, generally, for all our human beings, there is a class of pleasure, a class of pain. The more or less degree changes, but generally we say this is pleasurable for man, this is not pleasurable for mankind. But then in subhuman species it totally changes. So it is all inside. Sukha Dukkha Viveka has to be heard about. What is essential Sukha? What is essential Dukkha? What is seemingly pleasurable, seemingly painful? That's Jnana Yoga Sadhana. Then there is Karma Yoga Sadhana. Basically all our problems are because of the me and mine. Because there is I-ness and me and in you, we have all these pains and pleasures. When it is diminished for any reason, say when you are fast asleep, and you have slept, then you wake up in the morning and you see that under your bed there was a lot of dirt. Now when you were sleeping you did not feel any dirt. Only on waking up you felt dirt. Only when waking up you get the smell, etc., and your dirty smell is coming. But as long as you are fast asleep, even if the dirty smell is around, you don't notice. Why? The me is diminished. It is the me which feels all that. If the me is diminished, shrunk to a state such as a deep sleep or comatic state, any dirt around you don't feel. It's not obnoxious at all. Only on waking up you say, oh, this is obnoxious. Why it is around me here? So all our plain pleasures are because of the me. The I-ness, the mine-ness, the me-ness. So to mitigate that, the clamor of it, the tantrums of it, our subjective entity of pronoun I has boundless tantrums. We only identify tantrums of some individual. There's a lot of tantrums with this child. This person has a lot of tantrums. Actually, a fact is that our subjective entity of pronoun I, enormous tantrums. There's a clamor of it. So for clamor of it, there is Karma Yoga Sadhana. So that the I is cultured by Karma Yoga Sadhana. Therefore, Karma Yoga Sadhana should be understood for the problem of this Nitya, Nitya Vivek, Sukha, Dukkha Vivek, etc., etc. So Karma Yoga Sadhana comes in here. Dhyana Yoga Sadhana comes in here. Why? It's a duality of the mind. Mind going to polarities creates a problem for us. Mind oscillates between polarities and therefore it is a problem for us. Dhyana Yoga tells you how to neutralize the mind so you don't feel the polarities. So therefore there is Dhyana Yoga Sadhana. And then there is Bhakti Yoga Sadhana to have the supreme bliss experienced. When you have supreme bliss experience, you won't go to lower pleasures. You won't go to lower pleasures. You must get that, what is the anand, the taste of it. what is the supreme infinitude of bliss, then you will not go for paltry bliss out of peda, basundi, chuda, belpuri, panipuri. That's why one of the Upanishads says, Raso vai saha. Atma. Raso vai saha. Rasa means substance. Relishable substance. Usaचा रस, आंब्याचा रस. हा रस काय आहे? That is the meaning of the rasa. So he is such an essence. He is such an essence. Raso vai saha. So when you taste it, you will not be going after these tasteless things. एकदा त्याची चव कळली की ह्याच्याच आपण we don't get behind this, the taste of all these. So you must taste the supreme bliss. When you taste the supreme bliss, you will not go for lower blisses, lower pleasures. So therefore, it is implied in the second chapter, कर्म ज्ञान योग साधना, कर्म योग साधना, ध्यान योग साधना, bhakti yoga sadhana. So these are opened out. Now to open out that, how the opening of the jnana matter is by metaphysics. It is metaphysics, beyond physics. Meta means beyond. So it is physics beyond physics. We are not in physics beyond physics still. We are just in physics. Therefore, some metaphysical knowledge is only the means to know what is essentially truth. Physics will never tell you the truth and the realities. The physics will reveal you facts and actualities. It won't divulge you realities, ultimate realities. Physics is not the subject. Metaphysics is the subject for ultimate realities. So if you want to know realities, be in physics. Go after physics. It will tell you realities. But absolute reality, it is only metaphysics. In metaphysics there are subjects called ontology, teleology, cosmology. So these are the subjects of metaphysics. Ontology means essential, ultimate state of any matter. Any ultimate state of any existent thing. You and me are existent. This mat is existent. Is that right? This stone is existent. What's the difference between this existent, all you animate existent, and this existent? You are animate, this is inanimate. What is the ultimate reality of this? This is also existent. What is the ultimate reality of the spiritual entity? The inquiries into essential reality of the two classes, sentient, insentient, jada, ajada. That's the subject matter of metaphysics. That's ontology. Ultimate state of existent material, ultimate state of existent non-material. So, ultimate state of non-existent will tell you about what Atma is, how the Atma is, what is the nature of Atma. How is the nature of Atma? Ajanma, Amara, doesn't have birth, doesn't have death, doesn't have age, doesn't have sex, doesn't have gender, doesn't have caste, doesn't have caste, class, creed. It is immutable, it cannot be killed, it doesn't kill. Bhagavad Gita. Second chapter called Jnana Yoga, you get these precepts. Atma cannot be killing, Atma cannot be killed. Atma cannot destroy, and Atma cannot be destroyed. Atma cannot be cut, Atma cannot be dampened, and Atma cannot be burnt. So what is that entity? It is immutable entity, eternal entity, birthless, deathless entity. Jnana Yoga tells you about it. So there is chapter in Bhagavad Gita called Jnana Yoga. Adhyaya, second chapter, also called as Sankhya Yoga chapter, the second of Bhagavad Gita, Jnana Yoga. So we must be seekers of Jnana. Then only we get the discriminations. So second chapter tells you these are the means of yoga. Jnana Yoga Sadhana, Karma Yoga Sadhana, Bhakti Yoga Sadhana, Dhyana Yoga Sadhana. And what we do come in Dhyana Yoga Sadhana. Asana Pranayam comes in Dhyana Yoga Sadhana. It is not sufficient means. According to Patanjali's scheme. So Patanjali's scheme is further broader. Yet we are not qualified, therefore it is not divulged for us. When it will be divulged, the subject of yoga will be opened out to you. It is teacher's job to open out the subject to you gradually in piecemeal manner. And that's how yoga is transmitted. So means of yoga are to be explored, which are in the second chapter. So it comes to metaphysics. Another thing is that why are we tormented in the world? We are tormented because of the karma siddhanta. So we should know about karma siddhanta. What is destiny? What is accumulated karma? The karma is giving cause for all our existence and all our experiences. Why are we here? It is because of the karma. Why are we experiencing in our life pain, pleasure, delusion? It is because of the karma. Why will we perish after the end of life? It is because of the karma. So karma is cause of all this. Our coming into existence, our duration of life, our end of life, our condition of life, our states of life, our experiences in life, everything is because of the karma siddhanta. So the karma siddhanta again is an important aspect which comes as a subject matter of the second chapter. That is also a wisdom resource. When you are clear in karma siddhanta, you know about the law of karma, your sorrows will be mitigated. Because you know that you have come because of karma, you are living in a condition, in a class of life because of karma, you are living in a condition of life because of karma, you have different experiences in life because of karma, and you are going to perish because of the karma. You are going to take rebirth again because of the karma. So karma siddhanta should be known for essential knowledge. So this is subject matter of second chapter. These are the means of knowledge. Jnana, karma, dhyana, bhakti. The knowledge aspect of it, information of aspect of it, and the knowledge aspect of it is again a means for us. And that is why the second chapter is precept on means. Sadhana and not sadhana. First the means must be clear, then you will go for right practices. If the means are not properly conceived or wrong means are conceived, your practices are going to be wrong. So first become clear about the means, then let us discuss about the sadhana practices for it. That's why it is sadhana pada. Now for next Sunday, we will open out and proceed to the first sutta of it. How it is impregnated with all the four yogas. Jnana, dhyana, karma, bhakti. All the four come in Kriya Yoga. That is Kriya Yoga. Not the popular Kriya Yoga that we have today in the world, particularly in the West. Like you have anger yoga, there is Kriya Yoga. Then some Kriya Yoga is the Shatkarma Siddhi, Shatkarma Shuddhi Karma. Neti, Bhasti, Dhauti, Kapalbhati, etc. They call it Kriya Yoga. Patanjali is not mentioning, embarking upon those. It's a technical term, Kriya Yoga. Not Neti, Dhauti, Bhasti, Kapalbhati, etc., etc. Trataka. Those Shatkriyas are not being mentioned here. It is Kriya Yoga. It's a technical term. Another technical term, Kriya Yoga, has another technical meaning called Puja Vidhi, worship form. In Puranas, the word Kriya Yoga comes. The meaning there is worship form. a particular meticulous process of worshipping. That's also Kriya Yoga. Patanjali is mentioning his Kriya Yoga, he defines it so that we won't be getting confused between what is this Kriya Yoga, what is the popular Kriya Yoga that you are getting today in the world, or what is Kriya Yoga mentioned in Bhakti, the Purana Shastras. So he describes it. So I think for the time being, the enunciation is over. So we will identify Karma Siddhanta, which is the very fundamental aspect of yoga. Then you will identify Jnana Karma Dhyana Bhakti Sadhana, which will open out some portal for us to commence our practices. Whether there is Bhakti Yoga component coming in or not, Jnana Yoga component coming in or not, Dhyana Yoga component coming in or not, Karma Yoga component coming in or not. So you will have more discerning practices if you have this information about it. So Patanjali will be our Google. Then when we proceed to our Asana Pranayam, we have to identify, is there Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga component, Bhakti Yoga component? It must be identified. It is there. And it has to be identified so that you can nurture it and evolve it so that our practices will be more proper. Enough for the time being? वैज्ञानिक शिक्षकत्वे कलाकार आसनेषु यः योगाभ्यासे च तत्त्वज्ञस् तं वन्दे गुरुसुन्दरं गुरुम् योगवृक्षो लोकेऽस्मिन् वर्धितो यस्य प्रेरणया योगाचार्याय गुरवे सुंदराय नमो नमः. Any one question you want have? Any itching question? Thank God.